The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The pyre is already burning. Luke Skywalker stands at the edge of the forest moon, holding his father's armor in his arms, the way a child holds something too heavy to carry and too precious to set down. The flames are quiet. Everything is quiet. The war is over, and the galaxy doesn't know it yet. And in this small clearing on Endor, a son is watching the last physical evidence of his father turn to ash. The armor goes last. It always does. Metal takes longer than flesh. I told him I would save him. The thought belongs to the dying man, the man inside the suit, the man who was Anakin Skywalker before he was anything else, surfacing now through 23 years of scar tissue and mechanical breathing, and choices that cannot be undone. Luke's face blurs at the edges of his vision. I told him. He can feel the Force around him the way he felt it as a boy on Tatooine. Vast and warm and impersonal, the way the desert wind is warm and impersonal. He spent 2 decades cutting himself off from it. Now it fills every centimeter of the space the darkness used to occupy, and it is achingly, unbearably clean. Luke says something. He cannot hear the words anymore. The Force pulls. The heartbeat comes first. His own, young, strong 70 beats a minute instead of the mechanical pump he wore for so long that he stopped noticing it was not a heart. Anakin Skywalker, 45 years old and the only part of him that matters, opens his eyes inside the body of a 22-year-old, and the first thing he registers is the smell. The Jedi Council chamber smells of old stone and recycled air, and something faintly like incense. And he had forgotten, in 2 decades of filtered oxygen through a respirator, what recycled air actually smells like. He inhales. He exhales. 12 seats. 11 of them occupied. His own is empty. He has been standing at the center of the room, mid-sentence, mid-debrief. Reporting on the rescue of the Chancellor from Grievous's flagship above Coruscant, the shape of the battle still fresh in every room that contains him. His hands. He looks at his hands. Both of them, real. Flesh, the left one he lost on Geonosis, the prosthetic he wore for 3 years and barely noticed, because the grief over losing it was smaller than every other grief running underneath it. But here, now, the prosthetic glove covers a real hand. He can feel it. Every nerve ending registers the recycled air on his knuckles, the slight warmth radiating from his own skin. He presses his thumb into his palm. The sensation nearly undoes him. Skywalker, Mace Windu's voice. Hard-edged, careful, carrying the particular register of a man who has been watching someone go somewhere else behind their eyes and is deciding whether to be concerned or irritated. Anakin looks up. The Council. All of them. Yoda in his chair by the window, ancient and watchful, those enormous eyes tracking him with an attention that has never once been passive. Obi-Wan, 38 years old, alive, sitting straight in his chair with his hands folded, and that specific expression on his face, the one that means he is filing information away to ask about later. Ki Adi Mundi, Plo Koon, Shak Ti, all of them alive, all of them here, all of them dead. In another version of this moment, he is the only person in this room who remembers. Forgive me, Anakin says. His own voice is strange. Unfiltered by a respirator, it is softer than he remembers. Younger, he sounds like someone's student. Continue. Mace Windu studies him for exactly 3 seconds. Then, without looking away, "You are on this council," Windu says, "and we grant you the rank of Master." The room does not change. The light through the curved windows does not shift. No one moves. The words land without ceremony, without drama, in the flat declarative tone the Council uses for operational decisions. And Anakin Skywalker, who lived 45 years in the shadow of those words never being spoken, stands in the center of 12 Jedi Masters, and feels the sentence move through him like a frequency he has been tuned to his entire life. Finally received. He doesn't speak. He doesn't trust himself to speak. Yoda's eyes are on him. They are always on him. In every version of this moment, in every memory he carries, Yoda has been watching with that same expression that is not quite readable, not approval, not suspicion, but something older and more patient than either. Yoda, who once sat across from him in a smaller room and told him that attachment was greed and that grief was a door, and who was not wrong, exactly, but who had no idea what he was actually looking at when he looked at Anakin Skywalker. He couldn't have known. Neither could I. Understood, Anakin says. His voice is level. He has 20 years of practice keeping his voice level while everything underneath it moves at war speed. I'm honored. Mace's eyes narrow fractionally. It is barely a tell. In another life, Anakin would have missed it, because in another life he was not paying attention to Mace Windu's tells. He was paying attention to his own resentment, nursing it, cataloging it, keeping it warm for Palpatine to find later. He knows exactly what that narrowing means now. Windu is not suspicious of him. He is recalibrating. He expected something else from Anakin Skywalker in this moment, frustration, or relief that was indistinguishable from frustration, or the subtle coiled spring energy that Anakin has apparently always radiated when he is performing composure. He got composure instead. Real composure is a different thing. It has a different weight. The debrief continues. Obi-Wan takes over, his voice smooth and informational, describing the Coruscant operation in the ordered way he describes everything, sequentially without editorializing, noting variables and outcomes with the same tone. Anakin listens. He knows this debrief. He lived it. He stood in this room and half heard every word because the other half of his attention was on Padmé and on his nightmare and on the thing Palpatine said to him in the Opera House about a Sith Lord who could stop people from dying. He knows exactly what comes next, if he allows it. He is not going to allow it. When the meeting ends, logistics assessed, next deployments discussed. Obi-Wan's mission to Utapau still to be formally constituted. The council members rise and move toward the exits in the unhurried way of people who have more meetings. Obi-Wan pauses beside him. That was quieter than expected, Obi-Wan says. He means it as a question. Did you want a performance? Anakin asks. Something crosses Obi-Wan's face. Not quite a smile. The thing before a smile, when a person is trying to decide if they're allowed to be relieved. I wanted to know you were all right. Anakin looks at his brother. The word comes easily now, after 20 years of knowing exactly what it cost him to lose this man, and tells him the truest thing he can say without saying any of the things he cannot say yet. I'm going to be, he says. Obi-Wan accepts this. He would. He was always better than Anakin at taking a person at their word. After he leaves, Anakin stands alone at the center of the empty chamber. The Coruscant skyline fills the curved windows on every side, endless, vertical, the color of rust and gray in the late afternoon light. Somewhere in the government district, in a high office with a view of the entire city, Palpatine is waiting for a report. He will expect the usual thing, Anakin, angry and off balance after the council's slight, arriving at his office with that particular hunger that a Sith Lord spent 13 years carefully cultivating. Anakin looks at his hands one more time. Flesh. Both of them. He thinks of Luke's face at the edge of the firelight on Endor. He thinks of what it cost to get there. He thinks of a woman he has not seen yet today, who is alive, who is carrying 2 children she does not yet know are 2. He makes his first decision. He will not go to Palpatine's office tonight. The Jedi archives at night are a different place than the Jedi archives by day. By day, they are populated, initiates moving between terminals, knights pulling mission files, the soft ambient sound of a library that has been continuously operational for 10,000 years. The light is even and warm. It feels institutional. Safe. At this hour, the long hall is empty. The light drops to a lower register. The kind of illumination that exists for the sake of the building, rather than its occupants. And the shelves of datacrons and physical texts recede into shadow on both sides of the central walkway. The air is cooler. It smells of something very old, not dust exactly, because the temple's climate systems are meticulous, but the suggestion of dust, the memory of it. Anakin walks the length of the hall alone and does not need a light. He spent 19 years in a suit that turned darkness into a tactical environment. His eyes adjusted to nothing. He learned to read rooms by the heat signatures of the people inside them, by sound, by the Force's quiet readout of everything alive and breathing within 100 meters. He does not need to do any of that now. He simply knows where he is going. The restricted vault sits at the archive's far end, behind a door that requires two things: a council-level clearance code and the specific Force resonance signature of a sitting master. He has both now. He has had the clearance code for approximately 6 hours. He places his hand on the reader. The door opens. Inside, the vault is smaller than it should be for what it contains. The room is roughly circular, lined floor to ceiling with sealed holocron compartments, each one behind individual shielding, each one catalogued with a small identification plaque. The light in here is a cool blue-white, the color of a ship's instrument panel at night, and it catches the edges of the pyramidal holocrons and throws thin geometric shadows across the walls. He does not touch anything yet. He stands at the center of the room and simply looks, the way he has learned, the hard, obliterating way, to look at things before he acts on them. The habit took him 2 decades, and the destruction of everything he loved to acquire. He has it now, clean and available, loaded into a 22-year-old body that still defaults to motion, to action, to the next thing. He breathes through the instinct and lets his eyes move across the catalog plaques. Sith Manipulation Doctrines, Historical Survey. There, 3rd shelf, second from the left. He crosses to it and lifts the holocron out of its housing with the careful grip of someone who knows exactly what these objects cost to recover. The pyramid is dark, not inactive, but sealed, waiting for the correct resonance to open it. He holds it in both hands and does what every Jedi is trained to do, and very few actually manage without flinching. He lets it read him. It takes approximately 4 seconds. The holocron's gatekeeper appears above it, a small, projected figure, Jedi robes, a scholar's face. A name Anakin doesn't recognize from a century Anakin was not alive for. The gatekeeper looks at him with the particular expression of a recorded personality encountering an unexpected input. Master Skywalker, it says. The title lands flat and correct. This material is restricted to council members for reasons that will become self-evident. You are young for this vault. I know, Anakin says. The documentation here covers Sith psychological methodology as reconstructed from recovered artifacts, survivor testimony, and, in several cases, voluntary disclosure by reformed practitioners. It is not comfortable reading. I know that too. The gatekeeper is quiet for a moment in the way that recorded personalities go quiet when they are running through secondary protocols. Then, proceed when ready. He sits on the floor, back against the shelf, the holocron projecting above his crossed legs, and begins. The first section covers fear conditioning methodology. He reads it the way a surgeon reads a case file about an operation performed on themselves. The technique has a name in here: Sith emotional architecture. The construct is older than Palpatine by several centuries, refined through the rule of 2 across generations of Sith masters who understood, with a clarity the Jedi Order consistently underestimated, that the dark side is not recruited. It is built, brick by brick, fear by fear, in a subject who is never permitted to see the scaffolding going up around them. Step 1. Identify the attachment, the thing the subject loves beyond their capacity to lose it. Step 2. Introduce the threat. Not overtly, never overtly. The threat is implied, suggested, woven into advice and kindness and the performance of concern. The subject must believe they discovered the danger themselves, because a fear they discovered themselves is a fear they will defend. Step 3. Position as the sole solution. The subject must be made to feel that the standard channels, their order, their brothers, their teachers, are inadequate. Too slow, too bound by rules. Only the Sith has the power, the flexibility, the willingness to do what is necessary. Step 4. Wait. Anakin reads this, and his jaw tightens. Not at the content, He knew the content. He lived the content from the inside, from the position of the subject, without ever understanding what he was inside. He is tightening, because of the precision of it, because reading it laid out in academic language, in a Jedi archive document 3 centuries old, what was done to him looks less like seduction and more like engineering. Like a schematic. Like someone looked at a blueprint of Anakin Skywalker and followed the instructions. He was not weak. He was targeted. The distinction matters. It is the first new thought he has had in 20 years that does not arrive already wearing scar tissue. He keeps reading. The second section is harder. It covers what the archive calls prophetic leverage. The Sith practice of taking a genuine Force vision, which is always incomplete and always conditional, and reframing it as inevitable. The subject sees something true. The Sith confirms it, validates it, and then quietly removes every alternative interpretation until the subject believes the vision is a sentence, rather than a warning. He stops reading. He sets the holocron down on the floor beside him, and he sits with his hands on his knees and looks at the middle distance. At nothing. At the blue-white light on the opposite wall, and he lets himself feel the specific shape of what was taken from him. Not Padmé. Not his children, who are alive. Not his hands, or his body, or his years. The vision, the dream he had of her dying in childbirth, the dream he watched until it carved grooves into every decision he made for 8 months, the dream he never once questioned because questioning it felt like abandoning her. He was never afraid of the dream being real. He was afraid of his own helplessness inside it, the 6 seconds of footage that played every time he closed his eyes. Her face, and the word dying, and the shape of his own hands doing nothing. Palpatine never told him the dream was real. He simply never told him it wasn't. The fear did the rest. The fear always does the rest. That is what the document says, in the dry language of historical analysis, and it is the most quietly devastating sentence he has read in the 10 minutes he has been inside this room. He picks the holocron back up. The third section covers counter-methodology. He reads this section twice. Exposure, it turns out, is the primary tool. Not confrontation, not the dramatic moment of calling the manipulation what it is, but the slower, less cinematic work of understanding the mechanism clearly enough that it loses its grip. The Sith's architecture requires the subject's ignorance to function. It is a lock that dissolves when the light reaches it. He finishes the document. The gatekeeper reappears above the darkened pyramid. Questions? It asks. 1, Anakin says. Is there documented precedent for a subject who underwent this conditioning and recovered full autonomy? The gatekeeper considers this. The literature is sparse. The Sith are not in the habit of releasing their subjects. No, Anakin says. They're not. He returns the holocron to its housing. He stands. He rolls his neck once, and the joint pops cleanly, the way a young body does, and the mundane physical sensation of it grounds him back into the present moment with more force than any meditation technique. He knows what Palpatine is. He has always known. But knowing and understanding are different instruments, and he has just spent an hour in the vault sharpening the second one until it is precise enough to operate. He turns off the vault light. He walks back through the empty archive toward the temple corridor that leads to the residential wing. Toward the comm unit in his quarters that has one unread message waiting, Padmé's ID, time-stamped 2 hours ago. 2 words. Call me. He walks faster. Padmé answers on the second pulse. She is in her senatorial apartment, still dressed. It is late, past the hour when the Senate district quiets to a low administrative hum. But Padmé Amidala does not keep civilian hours. She never has. She is sitting at her desk with 3 data pads arranged in a specific order that means she has been working through something complicated. And the moment her face appears on the comm screen, she reads him the way she has always read him. Instantaneously, without asking permission. You're different, she says, not a question. I need to see you, Anakin says. In person. Tonight, a pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. She is running the logistics of a late visit from a Jedi Master to a senator's apartment, the appearance of it, the security implications, the 14 variables she processes before most people finish their first one. Then, Give me 20 minutes. He takes the lower transit lines. The civilian ones, slow and crowded even at this hour, because he needs the 20 minutes she asked for, and because there is something he has to arrange inside himself before he sits across from her and says what he has decided to say. The transit car smells of food vendors and engine exhaust, and the particular density of a city that never fully sleeps. He stands near the rear door with his hood up, not hiding exactly, just choosing the quality of attention he receives, and watches Coruscant scroll past the scratched transparisteel windows, the stacked light of 10,000 levels of city, the nav lanes of air traffic blinking red and white in the dark. He has rehearsed this conversation approximately 40 times in the last 6 hours. He has thrown out every version. She opens the door herself. The apartment is lit low, the decorative lights on their evening setting, and she is still dressed from the Senate floor, formal but with the jacket off, which means she reached a threshold of tiredness she acknowledges only in private. She steps back to let him in and closes the door, and they stand in her entryway looking at each other across the small distance between them. "The rank of Master," she says. "I heard." "Already?" Dorm monitors the council announcements. The edge of something moves across her face. "I didn't expect it to happen today." "Neither did I," Anakin says. This is true in more ways than he can yet explain. She leads him through to the sitting room, the one with the wide windows and the view of the Senate dome lit amber in the dark, and she sits. And he does not. He stands near the window because he needs the physical orientation, the city behind him, her face in front of him, the room between them that he is about to change the temperature of permanently. "Padmé," he says. She hears it in his voice. Her hands, which were moving to pour water from the carafe on the side table, go still. "I need to tell you something," he says, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond." Her eyes are very dark and very steady. She sets the carafe down. "All right." He tells her about the marriage first. Not as a confession, as a fact. He states it plainly, the way he has learned to state difficult operational realities. They are married. Have been, secretly, for 3 years. He tells her this in the tone of a man reading a mission report, because if he lets any other tone near it, he is going to lose the thread entirely, and he cannot afford to lose the thread. She does not speak. She watches him. He tells her about the nightmares, about the vision of her dying, which has been with him since Christophsis, which has shaped every decision he has made for 8 months without her knowing it, which he has been carrying alone because he could not figure out how to say it without frightening her. He tells her what he learned tonight in the vault, about prophetic leverage, about conditional visions and manufactured inevitability, about the difference between a warning and a sentence. Her expression does not change in the way he expected. She does not go pale. She does not reach for him. She listens, and her face does the thing it does when she is processing. A stillness that looks like calm, but is actually a very fast-moving silence. "The vision was real," he says. "I'm not dismissing it. But I've been treating it as fixed. As something I can only respond to, not change. And I've been talking to someone who was very interested in keeping me believing that." The last sentence lands in the room and stays there. "Palpatine," she says. Not a question either. He looks at her. Yes, she is quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, a lane of air traffic shifts, the lights rearranging in slow sequence. When she speaks again, her voice is careful in the specific way of a politician choosing words that will have to hold weight later. "How long have you known? That he's dangerous?" He chooses his own words just as carefully. "Long enough." She accepts this without pushing on it. There is something almost painful about how well she knows where not to press. "What do you want to do?" First, Anakin says, "I want to stop pretending we aren't married." Something shifts in her face. Not surprise, she moved past surprise in the first 2 minutes of this conversation. Something closer to relief, the kind that has been waiting behind a pressure seal for a long time, and is only now finding the release. Her hands, still folded in her lap. "Loosen. The order," she says. "I'll speak to the council. I know what they'll say." He finally sits, across from her, close enough that the city light catches the edges of her face. I need you to know that I'm not asking permission. I'm reporting a fact and making an argument. Her chin lifts slightly. It is the movement she makes when she is deciding whether to be challenged or moved. What's the argument? He has thought about how to say this for 6 hours. The code forbids attachment because attachment without wisdom becomes possession, he says. Becomes fear of loss. I know that. I understand it better than anyone in that building has any reason to suspect. He looks at his hands, then back at her. But I'm not afraid of losing you the way I was. I've worked through that. And a marriage that exists in secret, that requires constant concealment, that isolates both of us from the support we're supposed to have, that's not the absence of attachment. That's attachment in its most fear-driven form. The hiding is the problem, not the love. She is very still. That's a philosophical argument, she says. It's the correct one. The corner of her mouth moves. It is not quite a smile, and it is more than she usually allows herself in serious conversations. You've changed, she says again. The same words as the doorway. Different weight. I've had a long day, he says. He goes to Yoda's quarters at dawn. The old master is awake. Yoda, in Anakin's experience, is always awake, or at least always in a state of readiness that is indistinguishable from wakefulness. He answers the door without apparent surprise, and gestures Anakin inside with one small hand, and says nothing, which is his way of creating space. The quarters are spare. A meditation cushion. A few objects of meaning arranged without decoration. The Coruscant dawn coming in gray through the narrow window. Anakin says what he came to say. All of it. The marriage. The duration. His intention to bring it before the full council. Yoda listens. When Anakin finishes, the silence runs for long enough that it becomes its own kind of answer. Then Yoda lifts his eyes, those ancient, fathomless eyes that have seen the Republic across 8 centuries, and he says, fear of loss, the code addresses. Identify this in yourself, can you? Honestly? I could have once, Anakin says. I don't think I can anymore. I understand what the fear looked like now. I know what it cost. And I know the difference between that and this. Yoda is quiet again. Something moves in his expression that Anakin cannot fully name. Not approval, not the resistance he expected. Something older than either. Teach me something you have, Yoda says at last. Quietly, the way a very old teacher says a thing he has been waiting a long time to be able to say. Rare, that is. He does not say yes. He does not say no. He gestures toward the second cushion. Anakin sits, and the dawn comes up gray and then gold over Coruscant, and they talk until the temple bells mark the morning hour. Palpatine's office smells of polished wood and expensive silence. It always has. The Chancellor keeps the space with the deliberate aesthetic of a man who understands that environment is argument. The curved walls, the deep-set windows overlooking the Senate district, the desk positioned so that whoever sits behind it occupies the visual center of the room without appearing to try. Every object is placed. Every sightline is considered. The office is a performance of benevolent authority, so refined that most people who enter it never notice they are inside a theater. Mas Amidala stands near the door. The Chancellor's other appointments have been cleared for the hour. On Palpatine's desk, a single datapad sits at a precise angle, its screen dark. The meeting was scheduled for yesterday evening. Anakin did not come. The comm request arrived at the Chancellor's office at the 8th hour. Not Anakin's voice, but his aides, which was itself anomalous. Anakin Skywalker does not use aides for personal communication with the Chancellor. He never has. He is constitutionally incapable of that particular formality. It is one of the things Palpatine has always found useful: the directness, the impatience with intermediary layers, the way the boy arrives places like he owns them. The message, relayed through the aide, was brief. Master Skywalker sends his apologies. He has council business that requires his full attention. He hopes to reschedule at the Chancellor's earliest convenience. Palpatine read the message twice. Then he set it down and looked out the window at the Senate dome for a long time without moving. Now it is the following morning, and the second scheduled meeting, this one earlier, A breakfast arrangement Palpatine proposed himself. The kind of informal engagement that has always been the primary channel between them is 40 minutes from its start time, and the Chancellor has already received confirmation that Master Skywalker will not be attending. Council session, the message says. Unavoidable. Deepest regrets. Mace Windu, who has served this office for years and who has learned the precise vocabulary of his Chancellor's silences, does not ask about it. He stands near the door with his hands folded and watches Palpatine stand at the window. 2 cancelled meetings in 18 hours. From a young man who once arrived uninvited at this office 3 times in a single week. Palpatine's reflection in the window glass is a thin, precise, expressionless thing. He studies it the way a chess player studies a board when a piece has moved that was not supposed to be able to move. Reschedule it, he says finally. Dinner. This evening. Of course, Chancellor, the confirmation comes back inside 20 minutes. Master Skywalker thanks the Chancellor for the invitation and regrets that he has a prior engagement he cannot move. Palpatine reads this one 3 times. The prior engagement is, in fact, Dex's diner. It is not a place Jedi Masters typically frequent. The booths are cracked, the lighting runs to the amber side of dingy, and Dexter Jetster himself is constitutionally incapable of quiet. But Obi-Wan has been coming here since the diner opened, and Anakin has been following him here since he was a Padawan, and there is something in the scarred laminate tabletop, and the smell of fry oil that functions as a kind of decompression chamber between the temple and the rest of the galaxy. Obi-Wan arrived first. He has tea. He is reading something on a data pad that he sets down when Anakin slides into the booth across from him. "You look like you haven't slept," Obi-Wan observes. "I slept 4 hours. That's less than the recommended amount. I'm aware." Dex materializes beside the table with the specific gravity of a very large man who is also somehow light on his feet, sets a cup down in front of Anakin without asking, and disappears back toward the kitchen. The cup contains something dark and hot and not quite calf. Anakin wraps both hands around it. Obi-Wan watches this. He watches the hands specifically. He has always watched Anakin's hands. It is one of his tells as an observer, the thing that grounds his read of a person's internal state when their face is doing something diplomatic. "You've cancelled on Palpatine twice," he says. "Yes, he called me." Anakin looks up. "When?" "An hour ago. Asked if you were well. Used the word concerned 3 times in a conversation that lasted 4 minutes. Obi-Wan's voice is neutral in the way that means he has already formed an opinion and is giving Anakin space to arrive at it independently. He sounded like a man who expected information I didn't have. He expected you to tell him what I've been doing. Yes, a pause. I didn't, because I don't know. Anakin sets the cup down. He looks at the table for a moment, then at his former master, the man who raised him, who failed him in some ways, and exceeded every reasonable standard in others, who is sitting across from him in a diner booth with his tea and his measured patience and his fundamental decency, alive. "There's something I should have told you years ago," Anakin says. Obi-Wan goes still in the particular way he goes still when he has decided to receive something difficult without interrupting it. "Palpatine recruited me," Anakin says. "Deliberately, systematically, starting when I was 9 years old." He says it plainly. He has practiced the plainness. He identified what I was afraid of, and he positioned himself as the solution to it. He's been doing that for 13 years. And he is not what he presents himself as. The diner moves around them. Somewhere near the counter, a customer argues cheerfully with Dex about the price of protein supplements. The amber light hums. "How long have you known?" Obi-Wan asks. His voice is very careful. "Long enough that I should have said something sooner." That's not an answer. "No," Anakin agrees. "It's not." Obi-Wan picks up his tea and sets it down again without drinking. It is the action of a man buying himself 2 seconds to choose between several responses. "What do you need from me?" This is why he came here. Not to unburden himself. He does not have the luxury of unburdening himself. Not with what he knows and what he has to do. He came because what comes next requires Obi-Wan Kenobi specifically. In the particular way that several of the next several weeks require people who will act correctly when given correct information, and the space to act on it. "I need you to watch him," Anakin says. Not follow him. Not surveil him overtly. Just be aware of the pattern of his access to Republic intelligence briefings. Who he meets with privately. Any correlation between his private calendar and separatist operational movement. Obi-Wan is very quiet for a long moment. That is an extraordinary thing to ask, he says finally. I know. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. He says it without heat, without defensiveness. The certainty is not the certainty of ego. It is the certainty of a man who has read the end of the book. I need you to trust that without being able to tell you everything yet. And I need you to tell me right now if that's something you can do. Another silence. Longer, the kind Obi-Wan takes when he is weighing something against something else, running the balance in the part of his mind that is always running balances. All right, he says. Just that. No conditions attached. No qualifications trailing behind it. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who has been given a partial truth, and has decided that the partial truth comes from a source he trusts, folds it into himself and moves on. Anakin exhales. One breath. Thank you, he says. In the Chancellor's office, the dinner confirmation that never came has been replaced by a third message. This one is not from an aide. It is from Anakin directly, the first direct communication in 2 days, and Palpatine straightens very slightly when he sees the sender identification. The message is 11 words. Chancellor, I hope we can find time this week. Warm regards. Warm regards. From a young man who has never used the phrase warm regards in his life, who communicates in incomplete sentences and clipped directness and occasional accidental sincerity. Palpatine sets the datapad down on his desk. He looks at nothing for a long time. The key, he thinks, still fits the lock. It must. He built it himself, piece by piece, over 13 years of careful architecture. He knows this boy's fears the way a composer knows his own score. But the lock, he is beginning to suspect, has changed its tumblers. He does not know when. He does not know how. He does not know what it means yet. He will find out. He always finds out. He folds his hands on the desk and begins to think. The gunship drops through Mandalore's atmosphere at an angle that is technically within operational parameters and practically feels like controlled falling. Anakin sits in the troop bay with his hood down and his eyes closed, not meditating exactly. Meditation requires a kind of stillness he has never been naturally built for, but running the mission geometry in his mind the way he used to run combat simulations in the cockpit, sequentially, pressure testing each variable until he knows where the failure points are. Across from him, Captain Rex sits with his helmet on his knee and his arms crossed, and the expression he wears when he is deciding whether to ask a question. He has been deciding for approximately 40 minutes. They are 12 minutes from the landing zone. Ask, Anakin says, without opening his eyes. Rex asks. The inspection order covers the entire 501st. That's not standard medical protocol. No, Anakin agrees. General Tano's battalion as well. Yes, a pause. Sir, with respect, what are we actually inspecting for? Anakin opens his eyes. The troop bay is dim, the interior lights on their combat setting, and Rex's face in the half-dark is the face of a man who has been carrying a suspicion for a long time, without anyone senior enough to hand it to. Anakin knows this face. He watched it on Umbara. He watched it in the aftermath of Fives, who died alone with information that could have saved 66,000 Jedi lives, because no one with the rank to act on it chose to believe him. Rex believed him. It didn't matter, because Rex didn't have the rank. Inhibitor chips, Anakin says. The troop bay goes very still. Rex's jaw tightens. It is a small movement, controlled, the movement of a man who has just heard a word he was not expecting and is reassessing everything that follows from it. Fives, he says. One word, not a question. Fives. Anakin confirms. He was right. I need you to understand that before anything else. He was right about everything. Rex looks at him for a long time. Whatever is moving behind his eyes is not simple. It is the complicated thing that happens when a suspicion a person has been quietly maintaining for months is suddenly validated by a source that cannot be dismissed. He looks at his helmet. He looks back up. What do the chips do? He asks. Flat, operational, he already knows, or suspects. But he is asking because he needs it said aloud by someone he trusts. They override independent cognition when a specific command is broadcast, Anakin says. Order 66. It's a contingency protocol encoded into Republic command architecture. When it's activated, every clone in the GAR will receive a compulsion to execute their Jedi commanding officers. He watches Rex take this in, all of you. Simultaneously, silence, outside the gunship, Mandalore's pale surface rises toward them. Who gives the order? Rex asks. The Supreme Chancellor. Rex absorbs this with the stillness of a man who is very good at being a soldier and is currently discovering the precise dimensions of what that has cost him. He does not look away, he does not move. He sits with it, the way Anakin has learned to sit with things that cannot be immediately resolved, and after a moment he picks up his helmet and turns it over in his hands once. Slowly when? Rex asks. Soon, if we don't move first. The chips can be removed? ARC Trooper 5's removed his. The surgery is straightforward for someone with the right equipment. Mandalore's medbay has what we need. Anakin leans forward slightly. I need your help to do this quietly. No flags in the GAR medical system, no reports that reach Republic Command. Local records only. Rex is quiet for another moment. Then he puts his helmet on, and the visor locks, and his voice comes through the speaker with the specific quality of a decision made and filed. I'll handle the battalion roster. We do it by squad, rotating through the medbay on the cover of the standard inspection. 4 days. 3, Anakin says. We don't have 4. Rex turns his head toward him. The visor is expressionless, which means Rex is expressing something he does not want visible. 3, he agrees. The gunship touches down. Mandalore from the ground is a planet in the process of deciding what it wants to be. The war has left marks here, not physical destruction, mostly, but the particular exhaustion of a world that has been a battleground twice in 5 years and is choosing between futures that all carry costs. The city of Sundari rises from the white desert in its protective dome, and inside the dome the air is filtered, and the streets are ordered, and the government buildings have the careful architecture of a society that has been traumatized into precision. Ahsoka meets them at the landing platform. She is in Mandalorian armor, borrowed, mismatched, worn with the pragmatic comfort of someone who does not dress for appearance, but for function. She is 17. She is also, in the specific way that the best people in very hard situations sometimes are, entirely herself. She looks at Anakin with the evaluative gaze of someone who has been operating without her former master for 3 weeks and has strong opinions about several things. You're late, she says. The gunship was on schedule. You scheduled it wrong. She falls into step beside him, her voice dropping to operational register. The Maul situation is resolved. He's in custody. Almec is complicated. She glances at him sideways. Why is there a full medical inspection in the orders? The men think it's a punishment detail. Tell them it's not, Anakin says. Tell me what it is, and I'll tell them. He looks at her. She looks back. She has always had this quality, the refusal to be managed, the insistence on being told the real thing. It drove him to distraction when she was younger. Now, with 23 years of perspective on exactly how rare it is, he finds it one of the more valuable traits she possesses. I'll explain tonight, he says. Full briefing. You need to hear it. She reads his tone correctly. The pushback evaporates. All right, she says. The medbay in Sundari's government complex is clean and well-equipped, and more importantly, offline from the Central GAR medical network, which is what Anakin confirmed 3 days ago when he chose this location. The attending surgeon is a Mandalorian woman named Dr. Verada, Kryze appointed, who looks at the procedure documentation Anakin provides with the professional expression of a person reading something technically interesting and politically incendiary. This is a military implant, she says. Republic standard issue. Yes, in every clone in your battalion. Yes, she looks at him over the datapad. I'm going to need a more detailed explanation than the one in this order before I cut into anyone's brainstem. He gives it to her. She listens with the same quality of stillness that the best technical minds have, not passive, but active containment, holding what she is hearing without interrupting it until she has enough to form a complete picture. When he finishes, she is quiet for 10 seconds. 14 procedures a day, she says, with my team at full capacity, properly staged for recovery time. That's 3 days, assuming no complications. That's what I need, Anakin says. She sets the datapad down and picks up a medical scanner and runs it once across the back of her own wrist, a reflexive gesture of someone thinking through her hands. These men didn't consent to the original procedure, she says. No, then we don't need their consent to reverse it. We need it to do this. She looks up. Inform them what they're having removed and why, before any procedure begins. Every one of them. Agreed, Anakin says. The first squad comes through the medbay that afternoon. Rex briefs them in the corridor outside. 5 minutes, standing, no datapad. The plain operational language he uses when something is important enough to require directness. Anakin watches from the doorway. He watches the moment it lands. The moment each trooper understands what has been living in the back of their skull since Kamino. The expressions are mostly invisible behind visors. But the posture changes. The set of the shoulders. The particular stillness of men absorbing the knowledge that their autonomy was, in a precise and technical sense, stolen from them, and is about to be returned. None of them hesitate. They go through one at a time. And Dr. Verada's team works clean and steady, and the chips come out in small sealed specimen containers that Anakin has every intention of delivering personally to a specific council session in approximately 6 days. By evening, 23 men of the 501st have something no clone has had since the moment they left Kamino. An unconditioned choice. Rex finds Anakin on the medbay's exterior platform as the Mandalorian sun sets behind the dome, turning the filtered light amber and strange. First ones are clear, Rex says. I know. Rex stands beside him for a moment without speaking. In the amber light, without his helmet, he looks younger than his accelerated aging suggests, and older than his years simultaneously. The specific expression of someone who has done something that cannot be undone, and is not sure yet whether that is a weight or a relief. Fives would have wanted to see this, he says. Anakin looks at the dome, at the desert beyond it, pale and still. Yes, he says, he would have. Kamino from orbit looks like a mistake. A water world with no landmass worth naming, perpetually storm-lashed. The kind of planet the galaxy uses and does not think about. The ideal location, as it turns out, for a project the Republic needed to not think about. The cloning facilities run 11 levels below the surface, sealed against the ocean pressure and the endless rain, and from the shuttle's viewport the planet is simply a gray sphere wearing a collar of clouds. Anakin sits in the co-pilot seat and does not look at it. He is reading the Kaminoan contract instead. The original procurement documentation, 70 pages of legal architecture commissioned by a dead Jedi and signed by a Senate that did not know it was signing. Covering the production of a 200,000-unit army and the full biological infrastructure of its maintenance. He has read it twice already. He is reading it a third time, because the third pass is when the embedded language becomes visible, the clauses that are not quite explicit, the authority structures that are technically legal and functionally absolute. On page 43, in a subordinate clause of a maintenance provision, is the phrase Contingency Behavior Modification Protocols, to be activated at command authority, discretion. 11 words, buried in a maintenance clause. Covering Order 66, he marks it and closes the document. Lama Su receives him in the facility's primary conference room, a long, spare space with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the ocean, which is currently performing the Kaminoan equivalent of a pleasant day, waves at 3 meters. Visibility to the horizon, rain horizontal rather than vertical. Lama Su is tall the way all Kaminoans are tall, unhurried in the way of a being who has been farming sentient life for generations and has long since resolved whatever philosophical questions that raises. He folds his hands and inclines his head, and says he is honored by a visit from a member of the Jedi Council. And the honor is perfectly performed. Master Skywalker, he says. We were not expecting a formal inspection. It's not a formal inspection, Anakin says. It's a conversation. Lama Su's expression does not change. Kaminoan expressions rarely do. It is one of the things that makes them difficult to read, and one of the reasons he brought documentation rather than relying on the conversation to carry the weight. He sets the contract on the table. Page 43 flagged. The contingency behavior modification protocols, Anakin says. I'd like to discuss the activation architecture. A pause. Very brief, the kind that would be invisible to someone not specifically watching for it. That documentation is classified at Republic Command level, Lama Su says. I'm a member of the Jedi High Council, Anakin says, and I'm the commanding general of the Legion whose soldiers carry these implants. That gives me both the clearance and the operational standing. He keeps his voice even. Conversational. The tone of a man who is not threatening, merely informed. I'm not here to discuss the existence of the chips. I'm here to discuss the activation pathway. Lama Su looks at him for a long moment. Then he gestures toward the chair across the table and sits himself, and the unhurried quality of the movement is either genuine composure or an extremely refined performance of it. What specifically are you asking? He says. The Order 66 broadcast. How is it transmitted? Through Republic military command channels. Standard HoloNet encryption. From a single source? The authorization requires Supreme Chancellor clearance. Yes, and there is no secondary authorization requirement. No Council countersignature. No Senate Oversight Committee. The silence this time is longer. Outside the window, the ocean rearranges itself. The procurement contract was authorized by the Senate under emergency provisions, Lama Su says. The command structure reflects, the contract was authorized by a Senate that was not informed of the behavior modification provisions, Anakin says. He is still conversational. He has not raised his voice. He has no intention of raising his voice, because he does not need to. I've been through the original Senate proceedings. The inhibitor chip language does not appear in any committee testimony. It was embedded in maintenance documentation filed 90 days after the primary contract vote. The silence now is a different quality. It is the silence of a calculation in progress. What is it you want, Master Skywalker? Lama Su asks. 3 things, Anakin says. First, the complete technical documentation for the chip activation pathway. Full architecture, not the summary version. I need to know every node the broadcast passes through before it reaches a clone's brainstem. Lama Su does not move. Second, the Kaminoan facility records showing which batches received which chip variants. There have been at least 2 generations of the hardware. I need the differentiation. Still nothing. Third, Anakin says, I want the name of the Republic official who specified the Order 66 activation parameters. The contract shows Kaminoan implementation. It does not show who wrote the behavioral specifications. Lama Su is quiet for a long time. Long enough that the range shifts direction outside, that the light changes fractionally, that the quality of the room moves from conference to something more loaded. That information, he says finally, would require documentation I am not certain I am authorized to provide. Then I'd suggest you contact whoever you believe does have that authorization, Anakin says. I'll wait. He waits for 2 hours in a side room, with a window seat, and a view of the cloning bays visible through the interior glass. The bays are enormous. The scale of them is always the thing that hits first, before anything else. Thousands of gestation units in graduated rows, the soft ambient light of the growth chambers, the specific efficient quiet of a facility that produces human beings the way a foundry produces components. He thinks about the men in Sundari's medbay, the moment their shoulders changed. He thinks about the Fives file he pulled from the archive last week, the full report, not the summary, which includes the interrogation transcript and the medical findings, and the final incident report that describes in operational language how an ARC trooper was shot by his commanding officer while attempting to deliver information that could have changed everything. Shot, while the truth was still in his hands. The recursion of it is almost elegant in its brutality. A man discovers the mechanism of his own enslavement and is killed before he can expose it, in a locked room with no exterior door, except Anakin is standing outside it now. with the key. And the documentation to prove the door exists. Lama Su returns with a data drive and a Kaminoan legal advisor and the specific expression of a being who has made a calculation and landed on cooperation as the least costly option. The technical documentation is complete. He goes through it in the room, the legal advisor watching with the professional neutrality of someone paid to be present rather than to interfere. And he marks the activation pathway at each node, the HoloNet encryption key, the command authentication layer, the broadcast frequency, the biometric receiver in the chip hardware. The pathway runs through exactly one authorization point, one voice, one clearance code, one man. He marks it and closes the drive. The name on the behavioral specification document, filed under a Republic Intelligence subsidiary designation that requires 3 clearance levels to trace back to its origin, is not Palpatine's name. It is a legal entity, a shell, one of several. But the specification document requires a biometric signature, and the signature on file is matched to a Senate-level authority credential, whose issue trail leads, through 3 subsidiary records, to a single active clearance. He photographs the page. He knows whose credential that is. He has known for days. But there is a difference between knowing and having a document with a biometric signature on it, and the difference is what makes the next step possible. On the shuttle back to Coruscant, he opens a secure channel to Padmé. She answers immediately, which means she has been waiting. "I have what we need," he says. Her face on the screen is carefully composed, which means she is somewhere she cannot afford to be readable. Her Senate office, probably. For the closed session? For the closed session and the Intelligence Committee and the Republic Judiciary, in that order. He pauses. How much time do we have? She looks at something off-screen. Then back at him. Palpatine's office requested a joint Council-Senate security briefing. Standing request. It's been pending for 2 weeks. When was it submitted? The day after you canceled the first meeting. He sits with that for a moment. The shuttle moves through hyperspace, the white nothing of it filling the viewport. He's looking for a room that puts me in front of him, Anakin says. Yes, Padmé says. What do you want to do? He looks at the data drive in his hand. The Kaminoan documentation. The signature. The activation pathway. The technical proof of a mechanism built to murder 20,000 Jedi and end a republic, delivered by a dying ARC trooper no one believed, and recovered now in a sealed drive on a shuttle above the clouds. Schedule the briefing, Anakin says. Padmé's expression shifts. Not surprise. Readiness, I'll contact Bail, she says. Tell him to bring Mon Mothma. The channel closes. The hyperspace white fills the viewport, and he watches it, and thinks about a locked room and a door that opens from the outside, and what it costs to walk through it when you know what is waiting on the other side. Not much, it turns out, when you have already died once. Not much at all. The joint security briefing is scheduled for the 14th hour in the Senate's closed session chamber, a room that exists specifically for conversations the Republic is not ready to have in public, sealed against recording, swept for surveillance hardware every 6 hours, accessible only through a security corridor that requires biometric clearance at 3 separate checkpoints. Palpatine requested this room. Anakin chose to use it. He arrives 40 minutes early. The chamber is circular, tiered, the Senate's architectural language scaled down to something more intimate, 30 seats arranged in a descending arc around a central presentation floor, the lighting even and neutral, the kind of room that was designed to feel objective. Anakin walks the perimeter once, methodically, running a secondary sweep with the Force alongside the standard electronic one. He is not looking for transmitters. The room is clean. He confirmed that before agreeing to the venue. He is looking for exits. 4, 2 marked, 2 maintenance access. He locates them all and maps the distances. Old habit. 20 years of walking into rooms with Darth Vader's threat assessment running underneath everything else. Automatically. The way a body maintains its temperature without being asked. Bail Organa arrives next, Padmé beside him, followed by Mon Mothma with 2 aides she dismisses at the door. They move to the front tier without speaking, They have had their conversation already, in Bael's office at the 6th hour, the one Anakin was not present for, because his presence in that meeting needed to not be documented. What they decided in that meeting is visible in the way they carry themselves now. Forward, deliberate, the posture of people who have chosen to do something they know is irreversible. Mace Windu arrives at the 13th hour with Kit Fisto and Shaak Ti. He looks at the room's configuration, looks at Anakin, and says nothing. He takes a seat in the second tier with the specific quality of a man reserving his opinion until he has more information. Obi-Wan comes last, slipping in through the main door 90 seconds before the hour, and crosses directly to Anakin. "He's coming himself," Obi-Wan says quietly. "I expected a meta. He'd never send a meta for this," Anakin says. He wants to see the room. And what does he see? When he sees it, Anakin looks at the chamber, the senators in their seats, the Jedi positioned in the second tier, the presentation floor empty and waiting, the sealed door that has not yet opened. "Something that doesn't look like what it is," he says. Palpatine enters at precisely the 14th hour. He enters well. He always enters well, the pace that reads as measured rather than slow, the slight forward inclination of the head that performs humility without committing to it, the eyes that move across a room in a single sweep and absorb everything they find there. He has 2 aides with him and the red-robed royal guards who take their positions at the door with the practiced stillness of men who are furniture until they aren't. He sees the room. Something happens in his face that is too fast for most people to catch. Anakin catches it. 3 decades of studying this man, first as a student, and then as an instrument, and then as an enemy, have made him fluent in the precise micro-expressions that Palpatine deploys when he is recalibrating. It lasts less than a second. Then the warmth returns, practiced and complete. "Master Skywalker," he says, and crosses toward Anakin with both hands extended, the greeting he reserves for people he wants to appear to love. "I'm so glad we finally found the time." Anakin takes his hand. He holds it for exactly the correct duration. "Chancellor," he says, "thank you for making the time. I know your schedule has been demanding." The warmth in Palpatine's eyes sharpens fractionally. He looks for something in Anakin's face and does not find it. "Not at all," he says. "Shall we begin?" The presentation takes 40 minutes. Anakin runs it himself, from the central floor, with Padmé managing the documentation display. He does not perform it. He does not editorialize. He presents the material in the flat sequential register of an operational briefing, the contract language, the inhibitor chip architecture, the activation pathway, the Kaminoan records. The behavioral specification document with the biometric signature trail, moving from item to item with the same tone he would use to brief a battalion before a planetary assault. He watches Palpatine watch him. This is the specific skill he came here to use. He spent 2 hours last night, not reviewing the documentation, it is past reviewing, but reading Palpatine's strategic history, the pattern of his responses when a situation moves outside his prepared architecture. A Sith Lord of his caliber does not panic. He pivots. He reconfigures. He looks for the new angle of approach while appearing to engage with the current one, and the pivot happens in his eyes approximately 4 to 6 seconds before it happens in his words. The signature slide appears on the display. Palpatine's eyes move to it. Hold, 4 seconds. These records, Palpatine says, were obtained from a Kaminoan facility without Senate authorization. Obtained under my authority as a council-ranked Jedi General with operational command of the relevant legion, Anakin says. The legal standing is documented in the Judicial Department filing I submitted this morning. He gestures to Padmé, who brings up the filing confirmation. Reference number is on screen. A beat. The biometric signature trail on that specification document, Palpatine says, passes through Republic intelligence credentials. Those credentials are distributed to multiple authorized users. The trail terminates at a single active Senate-level security clearance, Anakin says. We traced it through 3 subsidiary records. The active clearance holder is not a historical figure. He pauses. 1 beat. It is you, Chancellor. The room does not move. Mace Windu in the second tier has gone very still. Obi-Wan's hands are folded in his lap and he is looking at the floor with the expression he wears when he is doing something very controlled with what he is feeling. Palpatine looks at Anakin. It is the first time in 30 years, the first time in any version of their history, that he looks at Anakin Skywalker without the performance. The warmth is gone. The paternal register is gone. What is underneath it is not rage and is not fear. It is the cold, assessing quality of a very old intelligence looking at a situation and determining its options. He finds them limited. This is a remarkable set of allegations, Palpatine says. His voice is perfectly even. You'll understand that I will require time to consult with. Senator Amidala has already filed a motion for a special judiciary session, Padmé says from the documentation station. The motion was co-signed by Senator Organa and Senator Mothma and submitted to the full Senate Judiciary Committee at the 12th hour today. It is already in process. Palpatine looks at her. Then at Bail. Then at Mon Mothma, who meets his gaze with the specific equanimity of a woman who has been preparing for this moment across several years of careful work and is not going to flinch at the last inch of it. He looks back at Anakin. "You've been busy," he says. "I have," Anakin agrees. What Palpatine does next is not what most people in the room expect. He does not deny it. He does not produce counter-documentation. He does not call for the guards, or invoke emergency executive authority, or attempt any of the overt moves that a lesser strategist might reach for when the ground shifts. He sits down. He takes the chair at the center of the presentation floor, the one no one has been using, the one that was there for a display subject. And he sits in it with the composure of a man settling in for a longer conversation. He folds his hands in his lap. He looks at the floor for a moment, and when he looks up his expression has changed again into something Anakin has never seen on this face before. Something that is almost, in its precision, respect. "You are not what I built you to be," Palpatine says. Not an accusation. An observation. Clinical. Almost curious. "I wonder when it happened." "It happened a long time ago," Anakin says. "You weren't watching the right things." Palpatine considers this. His eyes move around the room once more. The senators, the Jedi, the documentation still displayed on the chamber's screens, the sealed door, the guards who serve a function he may no longer be able to direct. "What happens now?" he asks. Mace Windu stands. He has been waiting, with the patience of a man who has waited his whole life to say something correctly, for exactly this moment. "Now," Mace says, "you answer questions." The session runs until the 22nd hour. Anakin does not stay for all of it. At the 18th hour, when the initial testimony phase moves into the committee documentation review, he steps out through a maintenance access corridor into a service hallway that smells of recycled air and cleaning solution and absolutely nothing political. He stands there for a while. The hallway is empty and poorly lit and completely unremarkable, and he puts his back against the wall and breathes, once, slowly. From the bottom of his lungs, the way he has not done in 6 days of moving and planning and being precisely what was needed in every room he entered. His hands are steady. He looks at them, both of them, flesh, steady, and thinks of nothing in particular for approximately 45 seconds. Then Obi-Wan's voice comes from the door behind him. "Anakin, I know," Anakin says. "I'm coming back in." "That's not—" Obi-Wan stops. He leans against the opposite wall. In the poor light of the service corridor he looks tired, which means he is exhausted, because Obi-Wan does not show tired until he is well past it. "I was going to say, well done." Anakin looks at him. "That's all," Obi-Wan says. Just that. The hallway is quiet. Somewhere behind the wall, the Senate's ventilation system hums its continuous, indifferent note. "Thank you," Anakin says. They stand there for another moment, two men in a service corridor not saying the other things. There are a great many other things. There will be time for them later, in some version of a future that is, for the first time in a very long time, not already written. Then they go back in. The Chancellor's office at the 23rd hour looks exactly as it always has. This is the thing Anakin notices first, walking through the main entrance with Mace Windu on his left, and Obi-Wan on his right, and Kit Fisto and Aegon Kolar, and Saesee Tiin behind them. The office is unchanged. The curved walls, the deep-set windows, the desk at the visual center of the room. The Coruscant skyline burning its perpetual amber beyond the glass, the same theater it has always been, dressed for the same performance. Palpatine stands at the window. He did not run. Anakin noted this in the hours between the closed session and now, as the documentation moved through the Judiciary Committee, and the arrest authority was formally constituted, and the Council convened an emergency session to authorize the physical approach. He had the window. 6 hours in which a man with his resources and his network could have been in a shuttle, and through the atmosphere, and into any of a dozen safe configurations across the outer rim. He stayed. Anakin understands why. Palpatine is not a man who runs. Running concedes the frame. It converts a political situation into a fugitive situation. And a fugitive Sith Lord is a categorically different problem than a contained one. He stayed because staying gives him options, and Palpatine with options in a room is a version of Palpatine that needs to be taken seriously. He has not stopped taking him seriously for a single moment. "Master Windu," Palpatine says, without turning from the window. "I expected you sooner." "We had paperwork," Mace says. The 5 of them spread into the room in a configuration that is not accidental. Anakin has been in this office enough times to know its geometry, and the positions they take cover the 3 approach angles to the desk and the 2 secondary exits without appearing to. Obi-Wan drifts right, toward the curved wall near the display cases. Kit Fisto, Kolar, and Tien hold the entrance arc. Mace moves toward the desk. Anakin stays in the center. Palpatine turns from the window. He looks different than he did in the closed session. Not diminished. Diminished is the wrong word, because whatever else this man is, he is not small, and the particular quality of his presence in a room is not dependent on political advantage. He looks stripped. The performance has been removed, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually over the last 6 hours as the documentation moved and the votes were cast. And the architecture he spent 50 years constructing was disassembled, brick by brick, in a committee room by 3 senators, and a Jedi with a data drive. What is underneath the performance is something Anakin has only seen once before, at the end of another life entirely. The Sith. "You have an arrest authority," Palpatine says. Not a question. Signed by the full Judiciary Committee and counter-signed by the Senate Intelligence Oversight Chair. Mace says. "You can read it." "I don't need to read it." Palpatine's eyes move to Anakin. They stay there. "I'd like a moment with Master Skywalker." "No," Mace says. The eyes don't move. "Anakin," Palpatine says. The name in his mouth is a specific instrument, the paternal warmth, the implication of private understanding, the suggestion that everything happening in this room is a misunderstanding between strangers and the 2 of them are something else. Whatever they've told you. Whatever documentation they've assembled. You know me. I do, Anakin says. That's the problem. Something moves in Palpatine's face. "Precise, fast-gone you would choose them," he says, "over your own destiny." The line lands in the room. Mace doesn't react. Obi-Wan doesn't react. They have both been briefed, carefully, on the specific rhetorical architecture Palpatine uses with Anakin. The destiny framing, the isolation language, the implication that the Order is a constraint and Palpatine alone sees Anakin's true scale. Anakin has heard this line, or a version of it, in 100 different registers across a relationship that lasted 13 years in this life and 20 more in another. "I already lived my destiny, Chancellor," he says. "This is my choice." Palpatine moves. Not toward the door, he knows the door is covered. Not toward Anakin. Whatever calculation he is running, it does not include Anakin as a viable physical approach. He moves toward the desk, one hand dropping to a concealed panel in the surface that Anakin clocked on his second visit to this office 7 years ago and has not forgotten. The panel opens. The lightsaber in Palpatine's hand is not the one from any version of this moment Anakin has rehearsed. This one is different. Shorter handle, different emitter profile, the specific customization of a weapon carried for decades and modified across them. The crimson blade ignites. Mace's amethyst blade answers it before the sound finishes. The room reorganizes itself in the space of a breath. Kit Fisto, Kolar, and Tien moving to positions, Obi-Wan's blue blade up and angled. Anakin remaining in the center with his hand on his hilt, but the blade not yet drawn, watching, because what he is here to do in this specific sequence is not lead, but read. Palpatine is fast. This is the thing that always needs to be said, because the temptation when watching a very old man in very expensive robes is to underestimate the body underneath the performance. The body underneath the performance has been maintained by the dark side across decades of intensive use, and the speed that comes out of it when it commits to violence is not human speed. It is the specific velocity of something that has been choosing to appear slower than it is for a very long time. Mace takes the first exchange and gives nothing. This is also always worth noting. Mace Windu is the only Jedi practitioner in the Order's history to have developed Vapad to a functional combat level, the form that channels the user's own darkness back through them, requiring a practitioner who has darkness to channel and the discipline to keep it directional. Against a Sith opponent generating active malice, Vapad feeds. It accelerates. The form was designed for exactly this opponent. The second exchange goes wide. Palpatine drives left, forcing Kit Fisto to commit, and the blade catches him at the shoulder. Anakin is moving before Kit Fisto finishes falling. Not toward Palpatine. Toward Kit Fisto, catching him with the Force before he hits the display case, setting him down controlled. A single second, and then back up and repositioned. Palpatine sees this. The eyes register it, the choice Anakin just made, which was to protect a council member rather than press an offensive advantage, which is not what Palpatine's model of Anakin Skywalker would have predicted. His model of Anakin Skywalker is 30 years out of date. The duel moves. It moves the way serious duels always move, not the theatrical exchanges of a training floor, not the extended choreography of holodrama, but in bursts of committed violence separated by fractional pauses of assessment. The furniture in the office stops being furniture. The desk takes a burst of force pressure from Palpatine's offhand and skids 6 meters and hits the curved wall and splits. A display case of Republic memorabilia goes down in a cascade of broken transparent steel. One of the deep-set windows develops a crack that runs from floor to ceiling in 3 seconds. Anakin fights in the gaps. This is the tactical contribution he identified 3 days ago when they planned this approach. He is not the primary blade here. Mace is the primary blade. Vapad against Sith is the correct instrument, and Anakin does not have Vapad. What Anakin has is 20 years of fighting alongside Darth Vader's strategic intelligence, which is itself a kind of weapon. And he uses it to read the positioning, to move into the angles Palpatine is planning to use before Palpatine can use them, to cut off the geometry without engaging directly, to be where the retreat would go before the retreat is chosen. It is the most useful he has ever been in a fight, without being the most aggressive presence in it. It feels, oddly, like maturity. Obi-Wan takes the south angle and holds it, clean, precise, the economic efficiency of Ceresu making him expensive to approach, and Palpatine cannot find a line that doesn't have 2 blades in it. He is 3 steps behind the room. He does not accept this quietly. The lightning comes without a preparatory gesture. That is the thing about Palpatine's Force lightning. The thing that makes it categorically different from other dark side applications of the technique. There is no wind-up, no visual tell, no moment of gathering that a trained eye can read and react to. It simply exists, and then it is in the room, and the color of it is a specific wrong blue-white that carries the frequency of something that wants to end whatever it touches. It hits Agen Kalar. It hits Tien a half-second later. Both of them go down hard, and the room is suddenly 2 Jedi smaller. And Palpatine is moving in the space that opens, driving toward the cracked window, toward the secondary exit behind it, toward the version of this situation where he is outside the room and the options reconfigure. Mace intercepts him at the window. The lightning turns on Mace. Mace raises his blade, and the lightning meets it and does not pass through. Vapad redirecting, feeding back, the purple blade becoming a conduit for the thing it is intercepting, but there is more of it than there was a moment ago, and more again, and Palpatine's face in the lightning's light is something Anakin has seen before. The mask that was never fully removed finally falls away. Yellow eyes. gray-white corruption moving through the skin. The true face underneath the Senate's most beloved chancellor, visible now in the light of his own lightning. And it is old, and it is vast, and it is very, very angry. Anakin, Mace calls. Not a command. The specific register of a man who needs reinforcement and is past the point of making it an order. Anakin draws his blade. The blue ignites in the lightning-lit room, and Palpatine's yellow eyes find it. And for the first time in 30 years of knowing each other, looking at each other across a blue blade with everything stripped away, Anakin sees the fear underneath the anger. Small, precise, real, he takes one step forward. The lightning intensifies. The lightning fills the room. It is not a metaphor. The physical space of the Chancellor's office, what remains of it, the desk gone, the display cases gone, the window cracked from floor to ceiling, is lit entirely by Palpatine's Force lightning. Blue-white and continuous, pouring from both hands now with the specific quality of something that has stopped being a weapon and started being an argument. The sound of it is a sustained crack that sits at the frequency where sound becomes physical pressure, and the air smells of ozone and scorched upholstery, and the particular sharp nothing of superheated oxygen. Mace is holding. Barely, the Va-Pad redirect has limits. Not theoretical limits. The form is not theoretically limited, but practical ones. The limits of a human body channeling a volume of dark side energy that was designed to kill everything it contacts. His blade arm is shaking. The purple lightsaber is brighter than it should be, feeding on what it is intercepting, but there is simply more lightning than there was and more again, and the differential is visible in the millimeter Mace is losing every 3 seconds. Anakin takes this in across one breath. He does not raise his lightsaber. He extinguishes it. The snap hiss of a lightsaber going dark in the middle of a fight is a sound that carries specific meaning in Jedi combat training. It means surrender, or malfunction, or a choice that cannot be explained within the frame of the fight currently happening. Every remaining conscious person in the room registers it. Obi-Wan registers it from the south angle, his blue blade still up, his eyes cutting to Anakin with an expression that is 2 parts trust, and 1 part the concentrated effort of not asking a question. Palpatine registers it. The lightning shifts. A fractional reorientation. His attention pulled by the anomaly the way a predator's attention is pulled by unexpected stillness. Mace registers it and does not stop holding, because stopping is not an option, and he is not going to be the one who breaks. Anakin steps forward. He raises his hands, both of them, empty, palms up. The posture of a man who is accepting something rather than deflecting it. The physical grammar of Tutaminis, the deep lore Jedi absorption technique that most practitioners learn as a theoretical entry, and very few develop to functional depth, because it requires a thing that is genuinely rare. The willingness to let the dark energy in, to not push it away, to receive it without flinching, and without fighting, and without adding your own resistance to the equation. Resistance is what lightning wants. Resistance is what gives it somewhere to go. He has stood in this lightning before, in another body, in another life, on a throne room floor above the wreckage of 2 decades of wrong choices. He stood in it long enough to do the one right thing remaining to him, and that choice, that single, unrepeatable act of a father choosing his son over everything else, is the reason he is standing here now in a body with both hands and a future that has not yet decided what it wants to be. He is not afraid of the lightning. He walks into it. The moment the lightning contacts his hands, it tries to do what lightning does: arc, ground, find the fastest path through resistance to completion. His hands are not offering resistance. His hands are open, and his mind is open in the specific way that 20 years of being Darth Vader, of being sealed inside darkness and learning its architecture from the inside, gives him access to. He knows what this energy is. He knows its composition. He knows the fear underneath it, and the will underneath the fear, and the very old, very desperate thing underneath the will. He knows it because it used to live in him. The lightning enters his palms and he does not redirect it. Redirection would require resistance, a vector, the implication of a different destination. He receives it. He holds it the way deep water holds a stone, not fighting the weight, not throwing it back, simply containing it, and the containment changes the stone. Dark side energy is not neutralized by opposition. It is neutralized by the absence of what feeds it. It feeds on fear. He is not afraid. He is 22 years old, and Padmé's alive, and his children are alive, and Rex's men are clear, and the documentation is in 3 separate senatorial offices, and there is nothing in this room that can reach the things that matter. The lightning changes character in his hands. It is not a dramatic visual transformation. It is subtle, a shift in the frequency of the light, the blue-white becoming fractionally less wrong, the sound dropping half a register, the smell of ozone diminishing. To Obi-Wan, watching from the south angle, it looks like the lightning is going somewhere instead of doing something. To Mace, whose blade pressure has suddenly reduced, it feels like the source has been partially occluded. To Palpatine, it feels like something that should not be possible. His face shows it. For the second time tonight, the mask is not in place, and what replaces it is not anger and is not calculation. It is the specific expression of a man encountering the boundary of his own model and finding the model insufficient. The yellow eyes are wide. The hands that have been generating continuous lightning for 40 seconds are generating it still, but something has changed in the circuit. The lightning is going into Anakin Skywalker and not coming out. Anakin closes his hands. Slowly, the deliberate closure of someone who is not performing control but exercising it, the difference between those two things visible in the quality of the movement. No strain, no clenched jaw, no shaking. Simply hands closing around something and holding it until it is held. The lightning stops. The silence after sustained force lightning is a specific kind of silence. It has a physical presence, the ears ringing at the frequency the lightning occupied, the air still ionized, the smell of ozone settling rather than dissipating. In that silence, the room is very small and very wrecked, and there are 4 people standing in it, and 2 on the floor, and 1 man at the cracked window who is staring at his own hands. Palpatine is staring at his own hands. "That's," he says. He stops. He looks at Anakin. "That's not possible," he says. Anakin opens his hands. They are unmarked, both of them, flesh, completely unmarked, the skin the same 22-year-old skin it was before he walked into 30 seconds of sustained Sith lightning. He looks at them briefly with the expression of a man confirming a result he expected, and then he looks at Palpatine. "I've held this before, Chancellor," he says quietly, "and what it cost me was worth every bit of it. You are not as strong as you think you are." Palpatine looks at him. The yellow eyes search his face with the desperate precision of a mind that has spent decades reading people and is currently failing to read this one, looking for the seam, the hidden cost, the thing that must have been paid to make this possible. Because in Palpatine's architecture of power, everything has a cost, and the cost is always something vital, fear or love, or the willingness to destroy. He cannot find it. He cannot find what Anakin spent. He spent nothing. That is the answer. Two Dominies at its functional depth costs nothing, because it is not a taking, it is an opening. You spend nothing when you open a hand. Anakin crosses to him. 3 steps. Unhurried, he reaches out and takes the lightsaber from Palpatine's hand, the crimson-bladed weapon, and the taking is not a disarmament in the aggressive sense. No force wrench, no demand. He simply takes it the way you take something from someone who has stopped holding on. Palpatine's fingers open. He steps back. He looks at the lightsaber in his hand for a moment, then sets it on what remains of the windowsill. "Mace," he says. Mace Windu moves forward from his position near the window frame. His blade is still lit, and he extinguishes it now. And the room drops to the ambient light of Coruscant's perpetual nightglow coming through the cracked glass. He reaches into his robe and removes a set of force-inhibiting cuffs, standard Jedi security issue, the kind used for high-value force-sensitive detentions, and he looks at Palpatine with an expression that has been waiting its entire career to be the correct expression for a moment. Not triumph. Something harder and cleaner than triumph. "Sidious," Mace says, "by the authority of this Council and the Senate of the Republic, you are under arrest." Palpatine looks at the cuffs. He looks at Mace. He looks at Anakin. In the yellow eyes, for one visible second, is something Anakin has never seen there in any version of their history. Not the cold assessment, not the warmth of the performance, not the anger of the lightning. Something older than any of those. He holds out his wrists. Obi-Wan checks Agen Kolar first, then Saesee Tiin. Both alive, the lightning hit them, but Palpatine was managing multiple targets and the volume was distributed. Kolar has burns along his right side. Tiin is unconscious, but breathing. Obi-Wan's hands move over them with the efficient tenderness of a healer who is also a soldier, finding the injuries, assessing. Flagging what needs immediate medbay attention. Anakin watches him do this. He watches his brother's hands moving over two men who are alive, because the room went differently than it did in another version of this night, when Anakin himself was the reason it went wrong, and the weight of that is not guilt. Guilt would be too small, too self-referential for what he is feeling. It is something larger and quieter. The specific gravity of a corrected thing. Kit Fisto, who went down early from the shoulder strike, has pulled himself upright against the far wall. He is holding his arm. He looks at Anakin across the room with an expression that is asking several questions simultaneously. Anakin nods once. Kit Fisto nods back. He does not ask the questions aloud. There will be time for them. Mace has Palpatine at the door, the cuffs in place, the two remaining guards outside the entrance looking at the room's condition with the expression of men reassessing their employment situation. Mace glances back at Anakin. "Council chamber," he says. 1 hour. "I'll be there," Anakin says. Mace takes Palpatine out. The door closes. The room is very quiet. Obi-Wan finishes his assessment of Tien and sits back on his heels and looks at the ceiling for a moment. The ceiling, which has scorch marks on it from the lightning, long dark channels running across the plasterwork and radiating lines from the point of origin above the window. "Tutaminis," Obi-Wan says, not accusatory, genuinely curious. "To that depth?" "Yes," Anakin says. "When did you?" Obi-Wan stops. He looks at Anakin with the expression he wears when he is doing arithmetic, and the numbers are not adding up to a conclusion he can reach with the information he has. "You knew you could do that?" "Yes, before you walked into it." "Yes." Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment. "All right," he says. The same word he said in the diner. Carrying the same weight. The weight of a man choosing to trust the source over the gap in the explanation. He stands and brushes plaster dust from his robe and looks around the destroyed office one final time with the expression of a man filing something away for a much longer conversation later. "Council chamber," he says. 1 hour. "I know," Anakin says. Obi-Wan goes. Anakin stays in the room alone for a moment. The cracked window lets in a thread of Coruscant's night air, cold, carrying the city's ambient smell of fuel and recycled atmosphere, and something faintly metallic. He breathes it. His hands are steady. He looks at them once more. Both of them. Unmarked. Flesh. Steady. And then he looks out through the cracked window at the city that does not know yet what has just happened inside this room. It will know soon. He picks up Palpatine's lightsaber from the windowsill and puts it in his pocket and walks toward the door. The war ends on a Tuesday. Not with a ceremony, not with a speech in the Senate Rotunda, or a military parade through Coruscant's upper lanes, or any of the formal architecture that republics use to mark the conclusions of things. It ends with a series of cascade effects. Separatist command structure collapsing inside 72 hours, once the intelligence community releases the documentation proving their leadership was controlled by the same man who controlled the Republic, count after count standing down without engagement once the orders stopped coming. Clone battalions across 30 systems receiving new standing orders through channels that no longer route through a chancellor's office. It ends quietly, the way most things that have been wrong for a long time end when the wrong thing is finally removed. Anakin hears about the formal cessation through Obi-Wan, who calms him from Utapau, where the last organized separatist holdout laid down arms at the 14th hour. Obi-Wan's voice on the channel is tired and clean and carries the specific quality of a man who has been in a war for 3 years and has just been told he can stop. "It's done," Obi-Wan says. "I know," Anakin says. A pause. "How's Padmé?" Ask her yourself. She's right here. Another pause, shorter. Tell her the Senate owes her approximately everything. She knows, Anakin says. She'll want to hear you say it anyway. The channel closes. Padmé Amidala, beside him on the couch in the senatorial apartment with her feet tucked under her and both hands wrapped around a cup of tea she has been letting go cold for an hour, looks at him with an expression that is too tired for a smile and too relieved for anything else. He's well? She asks. He's Obi-Wan, Anakin says. He's fine. The council session convenes 3 days later. The chamber is full, all 12 seats occupied for the first time in months. The masters returned from their various deployments, the morning light coming through the curved windows and the long gold bars that mean early hour and clear sky. Anakin stands at the center of the room the way he has stood here before, in this exact physical position, and the difference between this version and every previous one is that he is not waiting for anything to be taken from him. Yoda speaks first. A debt. This order owes you, he says. The ancient voice carries its usual weight, not theatrical gravity, just the genuine density of someone who has been alive for 9 centuries and knows the difference between a significant moment and an ordinary one. Prevented, what you prevented. Named, it cannot fully be. The chips, Mace says. He is looking at Anakin with the expression he has worn in most of their interactions over the last 2 weeks, the recalibrating expression, the one that means he is updating a model he thought was complete. 66,000 Jedi. Every active clone battalion. The math is... He stops. Starts again. We would not have survived it. No, Anakin says. You wouldn't have. The chamber sits with this. Outside, Coruscant continues its perpetual motion. The air lanes, the administrative hum, the city that does not sleep and does not slow. Inside the chamber, 12 Jedi Masters sit with the knowledge of what did not happen. Yoda lifts his eyes. Offer you something, we would, he says. Earned it. You have. Beyond question, beyond debate. He pauses. The pause is deliberate. Yoda's pauses always are. Grand Master of the Jedi Order. The title is yours, if you will take it. The room is still. Anakin looks at Yoda. He looks at Mace, who is watching him with something that has moved past the recalibrating expression into something simpler. The expression of a man who will accept whatever answer comes and mean it. He looks at the empty chair beside Yoda's that the Grand Master's seat has always been. The seat above all others in this circle, the weight above all weights. He already carried that weight once. Not this title, not this exact form of it, but the weight of being the singular point on which everything balances. The man the galaxy looks to, the man the Order looks to, the man who must be the answer, because he has made himself the only one large enough to hold the question. He carried it for 20 years inside a suit that breathed for him. He carried it until it broke everything he loved, and then he carried it broken. He knows exactly what it costs. I'm honored, Anakin says. Genuinely, I need you to understand that before I say no. Yoda's expression does not change. In it, if you know how to look. And Anakin has been learning how to look at Yoda for 22 years, is the specific quality of an answer that was not entirely unexpected. Already know what you want instead, Yoda says. Quietly, not a question. I already carried that weight once, Master Yoda, Anakin says. I'd rather carry my daughter. The chamber does not erupt. It does not go cold. It absorbs the sentence the way the council absorbs everything significant, with the particular attentive stillness of 12 people who have spent their lives learning that the most important things are often said quietly, without fanfare, in rooms that are not ready for them. Mace sets his hands on his knees. He looks at Anakin for a long moment with the expression of a man who has arrived, through a long and circuitous route, at something he did not expect to find but recognizes when he sees it. The marriage, he says. Not an accusation. A statement requiring confirmation. 3 years, Anakin says. Senator Amidala, I intend to make it a matter of record. Another silence. Longer. The kind that has several people doing several different calculations simultaneously. Running the precedent, the code, The argument Anakin laid out for Padmé in her sitting room 3 weeks ago, that he is prepared to make again in full, in this room, for as long as it takes. Yoda speaks before he has to. The argument, Yoda says, already heard it. I have. At dawn, 3 weeks past, in my quarters. The ancient eyes move around the chamber. Correct he was. The hiding, that was the fear, not the love. Mace looks at Yoda. Yoda looks back with the serenity of a being who has had 3 weeks to sit with a conclusion and has found it sound. There will be a conversation, Mace says finally. A full one. With the Council. About what this means going forward. For him, for the Code. For the Order's understanding of attachment and what we have perhaps been wrong about in our framing of it. He pauses. That conversation will not happen today. Today, we note the fact, and we move on. It is, for Mace Windu, an almost unprecedented degree of flexibility. Anakin does not say this aloud. Thank you, he says instead. Ki-Adi-Mundi, who has been listening from his seat with his arm in a field-dressed sling from the wound he took in the Chancellor's office, makes a sound that is not quite agreement and not quite dissent, and is somehow both. The sound of a man updating a position he held for a long time and finding the update uncomfortable and necessary in equal measure. Plo Koon says nothing. He has the quality, Plo Koon, of a man who reached his conclusion some time ago and has simply been waiting for everyone else to catch up. Shakti looks at Anakin with an expression that is, if he is reading it correctly, something close to relief, as if she has been holding a question for a long time and has just been told she was right to hold it instead of dismissing it. Yoda gestures. Once, with one small hand. The gesture means, that is all. That is enough for today. Go. Anakin goes. He finds Obi-Wan in the temple garden at the late afternoon hour when the light goes amber and the fountains catch it and throw it in slow arcs across the stone paths. Obi-Wan is sitting on the low bench near the eastern wall, with his hands on his knees and his eyes closed. And he opens them when Anakin sits beside him with the unhurried ease of a man who was not startled, because he heard him coming and chose not to preempt it. They offered you Grand Master, Obi-Wan says. How did you know? Because there was nothing else large enough to offer you. He looks at the fountain. You said no. Yes. Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment. The fountain moves. A bird that has no business being inside a temple garden has somehow gotten in through an upper vent and is moving along the far wall with the confident air of a creature that has decided this space belongs to it. I owe you an apology, Obi-Wan says. Anakin looks at him. For not seeing it sooner. Palpatine, what he was doing to you. The access I gave him by not asking the right questions. He is not performing contrition. He is stating an accounting, the way he states operational facts, sequentially without editorializing. I was your teacher and I was not paying the right kind of attention. You couldn't have known, Anakin says. I could have asked more questions. Obi-Wan, I'm not arguing with you, Obi-Wan says. I'm telling you I'm sorry. You're allowed to accept it. Anakin looks at his former master, the man who raised him on starships and in training halls and in the middle of a galaxy that kept trying to end them both, who did it imperfectly and genuinely and with more love than either of them was ever comfortable naming directly. Accepted, Anakin says. Obi-Wan nods once. He looks at the fountain again. Then, in the slightly different register he uses when he is saying something he has been composing for a while, you were the best of us, Anakin, he says. I mean that now more than I ever could have then. The garden is very quiet. I know, Anakin says. Not arrogance. The simple receipt of a true thing from someone who does not say untrue things. Thank you for saying it. They sit in the amber light for a while, not filling it. The bird moves along the far wall, entirely unconcerned with the weight of anything happening on the bench across from it, and eventually finds its way back to whatever opening it came through, and the garden is still, and the fountain moves, and neither of them says anything else, because nothing else is necessary. Naboo in the early morning looks like a painting someone made from memory, slightly more beautiful than memory can hold, slightly more vivid than a real place has any obligation to be. The lake country at dawn is mist and water, and the sound of birds that have no predators, and the light comes up gold and slow over the hills on the eastern shore and turns the lake surface into something that is not quite mirror, and not quite fire. Padmé is already awake. She is on the terrace with the twins, Luke in the crook of her left arm, Leia in the crook of her right. Both of them 2 weeks old, and mostly interested in sleeping, and occasionally interested in being displeased about something, and she is looking at the lake with the expression of a woman who has survived enough to understand what it means to be sitting exactly here. Anakin comes out onto the terrace, and she moves slightly to make room without looking up. The automatic adjustment of two people who have learned each other's physical presence, and he sits beside her and looks at his children. Luke is asleep. Leia is considering waking up, her eyes at the threshold of open, that specific infant expression of a person deciding whether the world is worth investigating yet. He puts one finger in her hand, her fingers close around it. The grip of a 2-week-old is a remarkable thing. Absolute, uncalculating, the pure animal insistence of a new person on connection. No strategy in it, no performance, just the hand closing because the hand closes. His eyes fill. He lets them. She's going to be trouble, Padmé says. She's going to be extraordinary, Anakin says. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No. He agrees. They really aren't. The sun comes fully over the eastern hills. The mist on the lake begins to move, slow, dissolving in the warmth, lifting off the water in thin threads that disappear before they reach any height. Leia's eyes open. They are dark and unfocused, and they find his face the way new eyes find the nearest source of light. He sits with his daughter's hand around his finger and watches the mist leave the water and thinks of a funeral pyre on a forest moon. The last image of another life. The one that cost everything and ended clean. Not here. Here is the lake, and the light, and the mist dissolving, and his daughter's eyes finding his face, and the world unwritten. Stretching out in all directions without a single line of it already determined. Luke stirs in Padmé's arm. A small sound, the preliminary complaint of a person who is about to decide he is hungry. And Padmé shifts him with the practiced ease of someone who has been doing this for 2 weeks, and has already developed the specific fluency that new parents acquire faster than they expect to. She looks at Anakin over the top of Luke's head, and her expression is the expression he is going to spend the rest of his life being glad he gets to see. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. He looks at the lake, at the mist still lifting off it in slow threads, each one catching the new light for a moment before it goes. "Nothing already written," he says. She understands this the way she understands most things he says. Not all of it, not the full depth of what he means, but enough. Enough to nod once and turn back to the lake beside him and let the morning do what mornings do when no one is trying to stop them. He breathes. He told them he would save them. He didn't know yet. Standing in a council chamber 23 years old and already carrying 20 years of grief, that this was what saving them looked like. Not the titles, not the wars won, or the lightning absorbed, or the names added to the arrest record of a republic that is going to take a generation to fully understand what almost happened to it. This, his daughter's hand, his son's sleeping face, the lake at sunrise, the mist lifting off the water, and the long day beginning, and nothing in the whole wide galaxy, already written. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.